Don't forget to subscribe to both Recollection Road channels so you never miss a new video. Also make sure to share and like the video to help it reach more people. Now let's take a look back at the best sellers of the 1980s. The Ford Escort was the best-selling car in North America, the UK, and Australia throughout the 1980s. It certainly wasn't the most glamorous of vehicles, but the reliable car clearly made up in popularity what it lacked in style. The Ford Escort offered more features for less money when compared to imported Japanese rivals. The best-selling giant doll of the 1980s is remembered for the frenzied craze it created, especially around the Christmas season of 1983. Cabbage Patch Kids were sure to be included in letters to Santa, and in the toy stores, fights were breaking out as parents fought to get their hands on the coveted dolls. In total, 65 million Cabbage Patch Kids were adopted during the decade. Old school computing heaven was all about the Commodore 64, and it was also North America's top-selling PC during the 1980s. The 8-bit home computer, which was introduced in January of 1982, would go on to sell 17 million units over the course of the decade. Part of the Commodore 64's success was that it was sold in regular retail stores, rather than just specialty electronics or computer stores. The Nintendo Entertainment System became the 1980s biggest-selling video game console. Just under 62 million units were sold in the 1980s, beating their rival Sega Genesis by a comfortable 31 million. The game that came with the system was Super Mario Bros., and it's no surprise that it became the decade's #1 video game, too. Every kid in the early 1980s wanted to get their hands on a Speak and Spell made by Texas Instruments. The handheld educational gadget with a robotic voice was one of the first of its kind, but sales really exploded after it made a star appearance in 1982's E.T. the Extraterrestrial. It also helped that E.T. was also the decade's highest-grossing movie. It's really no wonder that Trivial Pursuit took off and became the best-selling board game of the 1980s. Because let's be honest, who doesn't like to prove they are the smartest person in the room? The game was created in 1979, and just 5 years later, Trivial Pursuit was selling 20 million sets per year. Time magazine even called the game the biggest phenomenon in game history. Lee press-on nails were every prom girl's solution to a cheap, speedy, glamorous manicure. Sure, they didn't always fit right, especially on the thumbs, but they made girls feel like they were movie stars. That is until they began to fall off, because they didn't stick very well. These do-it-yourself artificial nails came in 3 lengths: active, natural, and glamour. The 1980s was a crazy time for hair, so it's no surprise that a large, toothy, curved barrette, called a banana clip, was a crazy popular hair accessory. The clips could be found in just about every drugstore, and were often sold in packs of various neon colors. Banana clips allowed girls to collect all of their long hair into a high ponytail, which resembled the mane of a horse. The brilliance of the best-selling members-only jacket is that it made you feel exclusive, but in reality, it really didn't up your social status. These jackets were fashion statements in the 1980s, and were offered in a variety of colors. The $55 jacket began to take off after they showed up in movies and television shows in the early 80s, making people across America want to be a part of that elite social clique. If you were lucky enough to have a fashion-forward mom who loved to shop, you may have owned one, but for the rest of us, we could only dream. Before he was an NBA champion, Michael Jordan was the namesake of a wildly popular sneaker that every basketball-loving kid owned, or rather dreamed of owning. Following his gold medal win in the 1984 Olympics, Michael Jordan signed a 5-year, $2.5 million contract with Nike. His signature shoe, the Air Jordan 1, helped to propel Nike to the top of the shoe world, and it led to one of the most iconic and valuable shoe brands ever. Created by a Swiss watchmaker in the early 1980s, Swatch Watches were colorful timepieces that became essential for any 80s kid. Not only did they look cool with their abstract designs and oversized numbers, but they were also really affordable, which meant that teens across the country all had them. Sales grew from $3 million in 1984 to $105 million in 1985. Thanks in part to a very effective advertising campaign, which made the watches part of the fashion aesthetic of the 1980s. The Kodak disposable camera marked an iconic moment in the development of photography. It was in 1987 that Kodak released a consumer-ready disposable camera called the Fling. This camera was good for 24 photos, and it only cost $6.95. After the Fling's release, other companies began releasing their own versions, and sales of disposable cameras shot up to $20 million by the end of the decade. Originally branded as Budweiser Light in 1982, this low-calorie beer shortened their name to just Bud Light 2 years later. The beer then introduced Spuds MacKenzie, the bull terrier who became a pop sensation, which propelled Bud Light to be the #1 light beer in America. And by the end of the decade, Bud Light was even rivaling Budweiser, literally, with the popular Super Bowl ad campaign called the Bud Bowl. If you enjoyed this video, click on this playlist to watch even more. And as always, thank you so much for watching.